I'll start with a quotation of Dick Cheney that he made at the Institute of Petroleum in London before the invasion of Iraq. And he said, rather candidly I thought, by 2010 we will need on the order of an additional 50 million barrels a day, barrels of oil. So where is the oil going to come from? The Middle East, with 2/3 of the world's oil and the lowest cost, is still where the prize ultimately lies. Seems to be the way these guys think, as somebody else's oil is their great prize. Here's Cheney given the honorary doctorate degree. You see, I was pushed into early retirement in January of 2007. Now, in April of that same year, just 3 months later, Dick Cheney was awarded an honorary doctoral degree by BYU, which is a startling coincidence, if indeed it is a coincidence. I'd like to point out, as you look at this photograph of Dick Cheney getting the honorary doctoral degree for public service, that on the front row sits one of the trustees of Brigham Young University, and he has his head down and he is not applauding. Neither is his wife, who's sitting next to him. And I think that's rather symbolic of a number of us at BYU. We weren't particularly pleased with this situation at the commencement in April of 2007. Now, going back to September of 2006, when I was put on administrative leave at BYU, we have these quotations from the BYU spokesperson, Carrie Jenkins. She was making it clear what was going on, what happened. She said, quote, this is from the Daily Herald, a publication in Provo, Utah, which is where Brigham Young University is located. She said, Jones was placed on administrative leave for publishing a theory that explosives were involved in the tower's collapse through channels university officials deemed inappropriate. BYU spokesperson Carrie Jenkins said, "The university doesn't have an opinion regarding the theory," she said. Now, I found that very interesting. They made a point of that. Now, it's not really clear to me why they found the venues for publication that I chose to be inappropriate. One of these was the Utah Academy of Arts and Sciences, which I spoke in April 2006, and which was subsequently published. The abstract for this presentation was published in the Utah Academy of Arts and Sciences publication later, their journal. So I don't really know why they found the venues inappropriate, but they made it very clear, and this is the point I want to emphasize, that they were not denigrating my theory regarding 9/11 events. Because the BYU spokesperson said, quote, "The university doesn't have an opinion regarding the theory," unquote. Now, BYU also made it clear during these months in late 2006 that they were under considerable pressure from various sources regarding my 9/11 research, and this was reported on in the newspapers in Utah at the time. It was to their credit that BYU admitted that they were under pressure. Later press releases in January of 2007 stated that Dick Cheney's office had contacted BYU, and this resulted in Cheney's invitation to BYU to attend commencement, just 3 months after my early retirement. So I think there might be more than just coincidence there. BYU also, to its credit, allowed 2 on-campus demonstrations against the policies of Vice President Cheney. These took place in April 2007, and I participated in both of them. This is, I believe, unprecedented at BYU to have 2 demonstrations against the policies of a politician. And any demonstrations on BYU campus are exceedingly rare. I can't remember any. I was at BYU for over 21 years. I can't remember any until these 2 on-campus demonstrations against the policies of Mr. Cheney. Of course, obviously, these were outside of the commencement exercise. and before the commencement exercise. Now, behind the scenes, BYU encouraged me to continue 9/11 research after I was placed on leave. I was pleased by that, of course, and I was in particular allowed to use BYU's state-of-the-art electron microscopes freely. And the result of this research using the electron microscopes was that we discovered iron-aluminum-rich microspheres in the World Trade Center dust in January of 2007. And then in June of that year, we discovered this red nanothermitic material in the World Trade Center dust. Both of these, of course, were after my early retirement, but because I was allowed to use the state-of-the-art facilities at BYU, Dr. Jeffrey Ferrer, who's the director of the Transmission Electron Microscopy Lab at BYU, was allowed to work with me, and his help was crucial in this research. So based on that research at BYU, a team of scientists wrote the paper, which is now published in the Open Chemical Physics Journal. It's entitled Active Thermitic Material Discovered in Dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center Catastrophe, published in April of 2009. And I hope you will read it if you haven't done so. I want to point out that BYU reviewed this paper before it was published and found it to represent sound science, and they approved it for publication. This was, therefore, in essence, a peer review of this research, and conducted by myself and this team of scientists, international team. Now, I had requested in writing a review of my 9/11 research, requested that of BYU just after I was placed on administrative leave. That review was not granted at the time, but the review of this paper, Active Thermitic Material Discovered in the World Trade Center Dust, this review of theirs finally satisfied my request, and I'm happy to say that BYU approved publication. They also approved of listing Dr. Ferrer on that paper as second author, and Daniel Farnsworth, also of the BYU Department of Physics and Astronomy, was listed on that paper as it was published in the Open Chemical Physics Journal. Their affiliation with the BYU Department of Physics was listed in the paper with approval of BYU. BYU has also allowed me to have a shared office on campus after I was placed on leave. They allowed me to own my own office computer. It's a very nice computer with all the 9/11 information on it. So it could be said that they were quietly supportive. There are a lot of white hats at BYU. I won't talk about the black hats possibly here at this time. But the point is this. About the same time as this paper was peer-reviewed and published, I was given the honor of being named to Emeritus Professor of Physics at BYU. And in view of these contributions to 9/11 research, my fellow researcher and friend Kevin Ryan said, "Hooray for BYU." Professor Niels Harrit of the University of Copenhagen followed with this comment, "Stephen, I am glad that you can see beyond your own and ours annoyance and point to the positive aspects of BYU's handling of their situation. Let me hasten to join Kevin and cheer for BYU loud and clear." Continuing from Professor Harrit, "We have to acknowledge the political space they live and operate in, and BYU deserves the credits you point out. One senses a high level of decency at BYU. Kind of the same thing I feel in the mainstream press these days. The young journalists try to squeeze some information in and take the discussion as far as they can before they run their head into the editor's hammer. Regards, Niels." It's true that my finances were cut majorly, but I have to say this has been in many ways okay for my wife and I. We've learned to live on less. We pay less taxes, which is very nice. And we are practicing living without the grid, using our wood-burning stove and so on. Leslie and I have actually taken the opportunity to try to live without the electric grid, anticipating that it may go off at some point in the future. And we're getting ready for that eventuality. And the facts are in, and I think now it is time for us to seek international justice. So given what we see here, both as a scientist and as a citizen, concerned citizen, I think that it is prudent for us to save up necessities, water, seeds, food, tents maybe, to build up our sense of resolve and resourcefulness. I'll tell you, there is a sense in the United States with this cloud hanging over. Whether people accept what I've been reporting and publishing about 9/11 or not, there's a sense that even with the new administration, there's a sense that the United States is proceeding towards some type of new element where we won't have the freedom of speech that we once enjoyed, freedom of movement, the ability to get cheap food and water and so on.
World governance.
Yep, New World Order, for example. I'll leave it at that, and I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You look like our Prime Minister.
I do?
But with balls.
I'm not sure that's good or not, but yes, I order an investigation of 9/11 because of the deaths of Australian citizens that day. Yes.
Is it true that the towers were designed to take aircraft hits?
Yes, that's correct.
That they were?
Yes, and that's in this first paper of mine, why indeed did the towers
But that was
collapse.
multiple hits too.
They were designed, the towers, according to the engineers, it's also in the 14 points paper, as I recall, briefly, but the engineers looked at the possibility of a large aircraft. At the time it was 747.
Yeah.
Was it 707? Thank you. 707, right. Hitting the 70s, so 707 hitting the towers, and it would not cause them to collapse. That's right.
Yeah. So there's no theory on why they would collapse, given the structure was designed
not just
to take
from
that.
a plane. You know, the theory, again, in both cases, the towers and Building 7, NIST resorted to computer models, which they won't share with you. You just have to trust them.